Okay, it appears the meeting is now live streaming, so welcome to all who have joined us for the regular meeting of council for Tuesday, February the 2nd. I'll call the meeting to order at this time. And looking to the agenda for approval, are there additions or changes, Ms. DeSoto?
Councillor Comfort has one to start.
Yep, but nothing from admin?
No, I do have one as well. Administration would like to add an in-camera item, please, under L1. It's a land disposition item, and we would go in camera to prevent the disclosure of information related to the town's negotiating position in accordance with the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act.
Okay, thanks very much for that amendment. Councillor Comfort?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I asked the council to add a new item to the agenda as H3 new business for council to discuss the recent rescission of the 1976 coal development policy for Alberta.
Okay, that requires a vote to add it to the agenda, so I'll call the question in support of Councillor Comfort's motion to add H3 to the agenda. Those in favor? Oppose? Okay, that's carried, so that item is on the agenda, and I'll move the agenda be adopted as amended. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. We'll move right into delegations. This morning we have Staff Sergeant Singleton with us to discuss the RCMP staff budget, as he wasn't able to join the Finance Committee. I'll ask Ms. Cottle to introduce the Staff Sergeant. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor Barrelman. Yes, exactly as you said, Council is looking at an issue around the funding of one RCMP officer through the use of our photo radar funds. And this was a discussion at the Finance Committee. Staff Sergeant Singleton had asked that he be invited to participate in that discussion, but was unable to attend our last Finance Committee meeting. And so since he's able to be here today, we put him on this agenda just to ask him to speak to that discussion that council was having, and then to be available for Q&A for any questions that council may have around that position and the funding and the impacts that changing it would have. So I'll turn it over to Staff Sergeant Singleton, and I believe he has another member with him as well.
Thanks very much. Staff Sergeant, the mic is yours.
Thank you very much. I just, again, want to thank you for providing us with the opportunity. So in the room with me is Sergeant Stan Andronic. As most of you have known, Stan's been pretty steady in our community for the last couple of years and was in my position for quite a while. So he's very knowledgeable on this. So I completely understand the town's position on looking at this. And when I first heard, when I was dealing with Ms. Cottle and Greg, when they brought this to my attention, there's a couple issues that I just want to be very transparent and make you fully aware of as decision makers. And those are how these decisions may impact community policing and public safety within the community. So when we look at our current complement, we do have 19 members on our provincial side. We have an additional 4 on our provincial side. And the way we've structured our detachment is those provincial members are incorporated into our watches. So when I talk about a watch, those are the available members to us that worked within a shifting rotation. So currently we have 3 supervisors that run a 3-watch system. Those members we have on a good day, we have availability of 5 members. However, in saying that, due to courses, sick time, training opportunities, court commitments, and others, we're very rarely do we ever have a full complement of members. The current shifting rotation that we're on is a 10-hour shift. And then we have 5 or 6 different shifts within the day. So in the morning, we have a shift that starts at a specific time. Later in the morning, we have another shift that starts Sometimes we have supervisors, other times we don't, really depending on the schedule. So when we look at potentially losing a member, some of the things I have to look at is, are we able to maintain 24-hour policing within our community? Are we able to maintain the current shifting model? Do we have to play around with the shifting model? And then when you're looking at those things, you also have to do an analysis of risk. And how many members am I going to have to respond to a given circumstance? How about if we have a priority? We're under a dynamic situation right now that we are negotiating with our first ever employment agreement or union. So there's a lot of things that we currently don't know right now. So when we look at potentially losing a position, we have to ask ourselves, what is our response time? Are we still able to meet our community needs? And with our current shifting schedule, we have a little bit more leeway and flexibility in being able to respond quickly. And we saw that really with this pandemic, where our community goals are policing priorities drastically changed with the influx of new people coming into our community. Our traditional crime really changed because we had more people coming into the community. We had less people in the community. At times, our rural responsibilities have really increased as well. So these are all things that we really have to look at. Canmore is very attractive community for people to come. For our members, it is challenging, however, because of the cost of housing. And when we look at that, and when I talk to our members, some of the challenges or reasons they come here is because of our shift schedule, because of our safe community. So we do have a lower crime rate. Members can come and take time off. And the morale is extremely high here. This is a fabulous community to live in. So when we're looking at being able to retain and attract people to coming, some of the questions they ask is, what is the case workload? What are the shift rotations? Do we have supervisors working, and can we get time off? And right now we have 4 members off. So when a member goes off, when they're off for more than 30 days, the billing switches and that goes on to our health services. So the communities don't get billed for those positions. So right now I have 4 members off that have been off for, I have 3 members off that have been off for more than 30 days. I have another member that went off last week. We're expecting that member to be off for a few months. And then with maternity and other things, I have 2 other members that are going to be going off. So when you're looking at 15 member complement, so those are the amount of corporals and constables that we have to respond. When you take 4 to 6 off, it really impacts our policing operations. As the town heard earlier in July when we presented our 5-year plan, we anticipated, or our ask was for an analysis or a look to be made for potentially increasing our resources in 2023, 2024, and 2024 for 1 position each. So those would be community positions. So one would be a traffic position, and one was going to be a community resource officer. So those positions would be able to quickly adapt to community needs like traffic, community safety, getting more engagement with our stakeholders, being more involved in the schools. And again, those could be generating positions as well with traffic revenues and such. So those are really some of the points that I just wanted to council to be made aware of. And I'll kind of end it at that. And I'm available for any questions.
Thanks very much, Staff Sergeant. And I don't know if Sergeant Andronic has anything that he'd like to add, but I'd welcome his comments as well.
Or just make them out over, making sure we're masked up. I don't have anything to add to that, although I just, the impact of taking a member away from a detachment is very large, and it's, in order to make that call, there needs to be a real understanding of why it's being done and the impact it's going to have on the detachment and the community. So that just, that's why I'm sitting in the room too. I think the presentation summed it up nicely, but there just has to be thought put into why we would take the position away, and in consideration of the benefits that we could lose from that long term. Not just we all know it was a bad year, and there's budgetary items that have to be looked at, but policing is one that is it's very important to the community, and it is a long term solution that we're working on. So, thank you.
Great, thanks for adding that. Certainly, council is aware from previous presentations from the RCMP. We're aware that our cop to pop ratio is very strong. I don't know if you have any comments specific to that. What you feel is an ideal cop to pop ratio for a community our size?
So I can speak to that. So in 2018, they looked at our police ratio, and we're 1 to 772. So one police officer for every 772. So that was with those statistics. And I did get the stats for 2019, and we're sitting at about 790 for one. But that's really looking at a community population. So when I reached out to our operational strategy branch, who provides the statistics and the analysis for us, one of the things that they really wanted to make you aware of, which I think everyone is that we are truly a seasonal resort type of community. So we have an influx. I know our hotels might be a little different, but when I'm talking to our rural communities, for example, Kananaskis saw an increase of, they estimate 4.7 million people came through the Kananaskis area this summer as a result of COVID. We know that we have Banff to our other side. And we definitely, I think most people in the room here have seen a pretty significant increase in traffic through our communities. So some of the areas that really impacts us is accidents. So I can't just send one member to an accident scene because obviously there's safety issues. And then we may have to look at prioritizing if we're removing members too. And we might have to do a risk assessment. Can I send a car to an accident scene, or do I have to send 2 members to a domestic disturbance? So these are really problematic and real issues that we have to deal with. And then so when we talk about it, they said the estimated that Canmore has a tourist population or a seasonal population of about 25,000. So when you look at that, our policing ratio dramatically changes, and then we're one police officer for every 1,315. So it almost doubles that policing ratio. I know, again, this is a public forum. We're in a very safe community. So when we look at our crime scene index, that looks at severity plus population. But I can tell you this morning, we had 2 members working in our community this morning. So if we had one accident on the road, that means that we didn't have very many members to respond. And some of the projects and proactive work we've been doing, we're often targeted from outside residents. And one of the things they know is when a new resident comes here or someone's coming to commit crimes in our communities, we have the ability to quickly do surveillance, have our general investigation work projects. And in 2 weeks' time, you're going to hear some of the successes in our mayor's report on some of the good successes we've had because we have time to focus on these areas. And if we're reducing manpower, we may not be able to sustain a GIS unit or a drug unit. So these are pretty important factors we have to look at.
Great, thanks for that additional information. I certainly am aware, I think all of council is aware of the regular input from the residents of the community when we do surveys that Canmore residents feel we have a very safe community, and I would certainly credit the RCMP for a big part of that sense of security here. I don't know if other members of council have questions for Staff Sergeant Singleton, Councilor McCallum.
Thank you, Mayor Barman, and thank you, Staff Sergeant Singleton, for coming to speak to us today. I am curious, so I appreciate you coming to speak to us, and I guess one of the questions I had, and one of the things I'm trying to confirm, is that this position that we fund through Photo Radar is actually a surplus position to our current complement. It was actually a community resource officer position that we had decided to fund through Photo Radar quite a few years ago. Is that correct? Oops.
It's my understanding strictly funded through the Photo Radar program in 2008. Our complementing decision on how that was going to be funded. I do not believe it was a surplus position.
I'm sorry, Staff Sergeant, could you just repeat
Yeah.
that?
I believe it was a funding.
You're sort of cutting in and out. If you could just
Yeah.
repeat what you said.
Okay, sorry.
I wonder if you can hear me, if you could send that.
I am in a position, not a surplus position.
Ms.
Okay,
Connell?
Sergeant, we can't actually hear you, and I'm the mayor's trying to see if maybe you can call in instead, because you're quite garbled.
Can you hear me now?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Mhm.
Sorry, I was on Wi-Fi, so I just switched. Sorry about that.
No, that's
That's
okay.
great.
Okay, so as my understanding, and Stan's here so he can help me, it's my understanding that in 2008, and maybe some of you were here, that was a funding decision. So it wasn't a surplus position. It was a decision on how to fund that new position.
I actually, I'm not sure that that's accurate, Ryan. That was a decision in 2011 for half
Okay,
the position. I believe in 2008 was an addition of a position considered at the time discretionary or an additional extra position. So out of our Photo Radar fund, we actually fund 1.5 members. The one in 2008 was a purposeful decision to add a member. In 2011, it was a funding decision for the halftime. So the one full-time would have been considered discretionary in 2008.
okay.
Yeah, and so that's the reason, I think, for me, why I considered that position, because it was considered surplus or discretionary to the detachment and to the community. And I also, I guess I want to make sure that you understand that this isn't just like a community policing position that's disappeared. We're actually going to be using those funds to fund a bylaw officer position, which comparative to our neighbors up to the west of us, we are quite short of bylaw positions. And so there would still be, your partners basically within bylaw that we would be getting this additional position through this funding. So could you tell me what the cop to pop ratio, that term, is in Banff, or?
Yeah, you know what? I don't know. I know a lot of communities are striving. So you can see it anywhere from 1 to 600 and 1 to 1200. It's really what the community is looking for. And I just really caution when we look at bylaw and what other people are doing, is really comparing the scope to what those are doing. Some of our highest call volumes are bylaw related offenses, which our bylaw unit wouldn't be going to. And some of those are alarm calls, which could be break and enter, and then traffic issues. So really you have to look at what the scope is and what the mandate of the bylaw position are. With an increase, we really try to have strong relationships, and I have been meeting with Adele, trying to have more conversations and assistance. But again, you're talking about two drastic different positions, policing versus bylaw. So
Yeah,
it's
no,
really-
and I understand that. I guess I'm thinking some of the things that we're looking at bylaw to prioritize are things that aren't necessarily a priority to the RCMP. And with, of course, as you understand, with bylaw, we have the ability to direct their efforts more in a more focused manner than we would with the RCMP. You know, you have a different master. So I guess that's just sort of, I can just provide for you my perspective in terms of why, and I was the one that brought the motion forward. So I'm the guilty party. But it's certainly not a position taken out of community safety in general. It's to address some of the concerns that RCMP are not able to, the public policing concerns that RCMP, it's not high on their priority list because they have bigger fish to fry, but is important to our constituents and our residents, and we need to have addressed. So that was my only question, and that
Great.
just an explanation as to where I'm coming from. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. And I'll ask if other members of council have any questions at this time for the staff sergeant. Councillor Comfort.
I'm just curious how our proximity to the Trans-Canada does that have any impact on that formula of how many members you would require for traffic accidents? Or I think if there are, people have quick access to the community if they have evil intent. So I'm curious about that.
So it doesn't have an impact on the police to population ratio, because really those are community concerns. So when you look at it, we do have, you just have to look out the window every morning and it's specifically on the weekends to see where people are going. And we live in a beautiful area and we're attracting tons of people. So when you look at that, we are a seasonal community. So we have highs and lows. In the summer, we're high. In the fall, we start dropping off. Then we have the ski season. So really, when they're looking at our police ratio, they're looking at that 25,000 for who's in our community, who's passing through our highways. And that's where we're sitting quite high. We're sitting at 1 to 13, 15. So one police officer for every 1,315 people versus if we just look at town population strictly, that's where we're sitting at 1 to 790. When you look around to some of our other communities and policing agencies, they're always striving to be between that 1 to 600 to 1 to 1,000. So the RCMP, we typically run vacancies to help our communities, which is debatable. We live in a safe community, but I just want to come back to Councillor McCollum's thing. Anytime someone has an issue with the RCMP or our priorities, we do meet with council, we do meet with our community partners, and we do have the ability to quickly react and change our priorities, which I believe we did a good job this summer, dealing with a lot of the new COVID type of things that aren't necessarily policing issues, but they're community issues. We live and work in this community and we want to do the best we can. So I completely understand where she's coming from, but we're always striving to try to do better. So any concerns or issues, I'm here all the time, Stan's here all the time to address these issues. Thank you.
Thank you. One last question that I have, Staff Sergeant, is around the ratio that you referenced, the 1 to 790. Do you know offhand if that includes our non-permanent residents, or is that only a factor of the permanent resident number?
That is based on statistics. So I believe our next census is 2021.
Right.
So
again, that would be based on permanent residents then, and wouldn't factor in
yes,
additional 3,000 or 4,000 people that may be in town as non-permanent residents.
Yeah. And the other thing that they have provided to me too, and I can try to build on this for the mayor's report. So they looked at similar detachments. They did not tell me what detachments they looked at, but the comparison average of the 13 like-sized detachments, so that population ratio was sitting at 825. So we're at 790. The average of the other 13 detachments of our similar size are 825. However, in that, I don't think there's many communities like ours around that have this transient or tourist population.
Great. Thanks for that additional information. Councillor Sealy, you have a question? You're still muted.
Thanks, Mayor Borman, and thanks for being here today, Staff Sergeant Middleton or Singleton. Being on the policing committee in the past, I was aware that we increased the contingent of RCMP officers in 2008, and that was the last increase. And also, we talked about the complement and the difficulty of being at full complement. Can you just remind us what that's like today? Are you at full complement, and has that been a challenge?
Thank you. It's been a very challenging year in policing for many factors. One of the biggest impacts that we see this year, obviously, was with COVID. So our members have been leave restricted, so we have not been allowed to take holidays. We're asking our members to go into pretty traumatic scenes on a daily basis. I'm very concerned about mental health, wellness, the negative media accounts, either warranted or unwarranted. Sick leave, again, we have the challenge of affordable housing for our members. So it's probably about 40% of our members live out of community and they commute back and forth. And then just members are getting burned out. We have to be very much aware, and thank goodness that it's more acceptable now to seek help and assistance. So as I said earlier, I currently have 4 members off. Those are all long-term. 2 of my members are going to be off for probably at least another 3 to 4 months. So that's a challenge, having members come in for overtime. When we look at reductions of staff, we frequently we're not able to predict when calls are going to come. So this summer, with some of our enhanced patrols that we're doing in the communities, it was very difficult for me to get members to come in because they were burnt out. They wanted time with their own families. They were scared about COVID. We deal with COVID on a daily basis. We have been affected within our office. We are going to communities, to houses, checking on people that are COVID positive for public health inspectors. So it's been very challenging. It's hard to get members to come into work sometimes, even though we're paying overtime. So it has been challenging, like many business owners, many community members. It's been very challenging for us as well.
Thank you.
Great. Well, I appreciate you being here, both of you being here today and answering our questions. At this point, I will move on in the agenda, but thanks for being here. And we'll look forward to receiving the mayor's report that you've been referencing. That'll be very helpful.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, take care.
Bye now.
Nice to see you. This time we have a second delegation, Mr. Brayman with White Mountain Tours. Mr. Brayman, the mic is yours.
Good morning, everyone.
Hello. Yeah, welcome to our committee of the whole council meeting, and looking forward to hearing your presentation regarding the request for relaxation of the current bylaws regarding the assist bikes and all that. So by all means, take the mic.
All right. I'm sorry, I seem to be getting a bit of an echo. I hear Mayor Borman's voice twice on about a 10 or 15 second delay. So finding a little bit disorientating.
Dennis, do you have the live stream running on a YouTube channel by chance?
I did, but I thought I
Okay.
had canceled it, but maybe that was the problem.
That likely could be it. I know I
Okay.
get that sometimes myself.
Wow. Yeah. So in case I looked like a deer in the headlights, that's what was going on. So again, I'll start again. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to hear us. Again, my name is Dennis Brayman. I work in business development, program design, and I do a little guiding on the side with White Mountain Adventures. We're a company based in Banff. The four senior employees, as well as the owner and proprietor, Mr. Gord Starman, are long-term Canmore residents here. So we're very invested in our local community as well as in the tourism community of Banff and the larger Bow Valley. This presentation is going to be short and on the lighter side. I did listen in on the last one, so hopefully this one will be a little bit lighter. So what we are requesting is permission to run a pilot program to operate guided e-bike tours within the town of Canmore, ideally using the multi-use pathway systems that are already established. A bit of background with White Mountain Adventures. So we have been guiding and providing guided tourism experiences here using professional interpretive guides for now over 30 years. So well established, hiking guiding in the summer, snowshoeing, ice walks, as well as some larger corporate events, team building events. We're the guys that provide experiences when larger conferences come into town, that provide, of course, so many jobs and hotel nights here for the larger hotels in Canmore and Banff, as well as restaurants and so on. So experiences, we hear again and again that experiences are one of the key factors that decision makers use when determining whether to visit Canmore and Banff or whether to visit any one of the other world destinations here. So providing experiences has been our key focus, and it's been one of the consistent challenges that our larger hotel partners and destination management companies have been coming to us, imploring, saying, you know, we want to bring people here. The area speaks for itself. Obviously, the natural beauty of the area. The hotels are fantastic. Restaurants are fantastic. But what is there to do? And so what we've been always trying to do is create these new experiences that are going to entice people to come here and provide economic benefit to our communities. And the e-bikes specifically are of key interest to us, and we're hoping that we can get a permission for a pilot project here. The e-bikes themselves, the benefits that they provide, they level the playing field and allow a larger degree of access for our clients. So a family, a group of four, for example, with younger children that wouldn't be able to bike, say, the Legacy under pedal power alone, the e-bikes can really help level the playing field just by providing that extra little bit of energy to go up the hills and so on. The e-bikes are of course, a speed limit regulated just by the manufacturer. And they are, as my understanding, already legal for use by private citizens to travel in groups in all of the locations that we are proposing. So our request is to run a pilot project where we will take that group of 4 or group of 10 or what have you that is already renting e-bikes or bringing their own and using the pathways where they're legal to do so. And what we're proposing is we put an interpretive guide at the front of that group to regulate their route, regulate their behavior on the bikes, regulate their speed, and also provide them with an enhanced guest, client, visitor experience where we can provide interpretation, which is something that we do professionally every day anyway. Interpretation specifically would include things like the history of Canmore, the benefits of Canmore, the environmental components living in Canmore as well, to be stewards of these cycling tourists and to guide them through the town that we love. So again, this is something that is already, to my understanding, perfectly legal for any group to do. They can rent their bikes or bring their own bikes, and they can scoot up and down the multi-use pathways, unless the pathway is specifically denied for electric assist bikes, and to guide them through a route that we feel will give them a great overview of Canmore, and then to finish them off in a downtown location where we will meet them with our vehicle and load their e-bikes up while they have approximately half an hour to 45 minutes to tour downtown Canmore on foot on their own and enjoy all the shops and services there. So the main benefits that we see will be economic, to first entice people to come to Canmore, to see that there is this activity, providing hotels with potential clients there. We have a small fleet of electric bikes ourselves, but we will be looking to supplement that. So e-bike rental shops in Canmore will benefit from that, as will the local shops and services in downtown. We're not looking at making partnerships with any specific shop or anything downtown to say, oh, go to this store, not to that store. What we do want to avoid is a Banff type operation where you have like the mega tourism with 40, 50 passenger buses disgorging people downtown and having a guide ushering people into this store and not that store. We really want to bring the flavor of Canmore, the culture of Canmore, which to me is, well, I wouldn't say athletics necessarily, but let's say outdoor active activities with an environmental stewardship component, a mountain culture component to that. I think that's something that White Mountain Adventures can do very well. And just a note on that mega tourism component here, I know in attending a number of Tourism Canmore Kananaskis meetings that there is some resistance to large scale tourism in Canmore. People want their small town and they don't want to be fighting massive groups of tourists. So what we are proposing is small tours, maximum 10 bikes, 10 clients per guide. But typically with our operation, we're running at around half that. So we'd be looking at one guide plus 4 or 5 bikes behind it, operating in a very controlled manner, of course, very respectful. When we do hiking, guiding, and so on, we're stewards of trails. We understand that it's a privilege to be able to be in these locations and to operate, and we don't want to do anything irresponsible that could jeopardize our ability to operate. And just speaking personally, as a citizen and an enjoyer of our trails on weekends and whatnot, the idea of having no guided tours or larger scale tours really means that the FITs, the frequent independent travelers, the folks from that are coming in regionally or whatnot, are coming in during the day and absolutely overwhelming some of our more popular, easy to visit locations, your grassy lakes, your Cougar Creeks. You've got parking problems. You've got the Spray Lakes jamming up because of so many vehicles. And you have the locals unable to enjoy their town and their environment. So what we're proposing is, we're not going to solve that, but I think it's a step in the right direction to provide guided programs where we can control when and where people go and keep them out of the way. I do have a route that I have proposed that I could share with you if there are no other questions before I proceed.
No, go ahead and
Okay.
share that with us, and we'll ask questions afterwards.
Okay, let's see if I can find it here. I think it's this one. Okay, so this is our pilot project here. We're looking for permission to do some guided e-bike programs. The one that I've got here proposing is from Banff to Canmore with a one-way vehicle shuttle return. But there are other programs that we could definitely build, including Canmore Origin that just stay in and around. But I thought we'd start with this one just to see how we go. So again, groups led by a professional interpretive guide with route speed and rider conduct controlled by an accompanying guide at all times.
Excuse me, Mr. Brayman, just giving you a time check. You're at 10 minutes.
Oh, okay. So that's all my time?
No, but be quick.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
We'd be looking at terminating at the Canmore Bus Depot. We'd be offering professional interpretation, environmental, historical, and cultural components specific to Canmore and Kananaskis, with the economic benefits, including local e-bike rental companies and downtown food, retail, and service providers, bringing the Banff-based clients to Canmore. This is the proposed route that I've got here. So coming in off of the Legacy Trail, arriving here at the intersection there with the Boston Pizza on the corner, and then going on to the multi-use pathway system, crossing the street here, running the spur line down to the engine bridge, and then going across the gravel access road to the power plant, over to the the pedestrian bridge over the Bow, coming back over Higashikawa Friendship Trail, and then finishing up on Main Street here and connecting to the bus depot. And then this is the location where we'd have our small 15-passenger microbus waiting to pick up clients and bikes. And then the idea is that while the clients are enjoying their shopping and their coffees, then we're loading the bikes, and then we pick them up and shuttle them back to Banff. This is a mock-up of what the tour promotion could look like. The Legacy Trail of Canmore here, got a nice shot of downtown. And here you go, leisurely bike ride from Banff through Canmore to enjoy Canmore's charming downtown. That's what I got.
Great. Thank you very much. If you want to reduce or take away that screen share, then we can perhaps have some questions. I have a few, and I expect councillors to as well. But thanks for providing that detail. The very last bit that you were speaking to indicates that the anticipated customers are Banff visitors. So effectively, you'd be bringing additional visitors to use our trails from Banff. I mean, additional over and above the already identified frequent itinerant travelers that randomly come and use our trails from the city. So just flesh out that a little bit, how this is being designed to benefit the visitors staying in the town of Banff.
Yeah, well, certainly the benefit to the town of Canmore would be to be bringing in tourism dollars that you might not otherwise be seeing. So I know that Canmore obviously has a large tourism economy, but that Canmore, through conversations with Tourism Canmore Kananaskis, Canmore has been seen to be Banff overflow or an also ran. And so this bringing additional exposure to the town of Canmore will, I think, bring those tourism dollars that might otherwise be spent in Banff to bring them to Canmore. And secondly, it'll be increasing exposure to Canmore, to saying, listen, this is our message, this is our brand. And perhaps on a future stay, you would consider staying in Canmore. Now, again, when I spoke about the quantities of people, when you're looking at a summer of the Legacy Trail reporting well over 1,000 users based on that little counter that you see on the 1A, we're talking about bringing an additional 5 people. Right now, the schedule that we proposed is twice a week. So you'd be bringing it up by 0.1% potentially in terms of additional users. And these, again, could be users that would be otherwise renting bikes on their own and doing their best to ride up and down the Canmore trails.
Of course, we would have to, if we're considering this, pilot program, we'd have to think about the future impact. And certainly if this opportunity became regular opportunity, I'm quite certain we'd see more than 2 5-person tours taking advantage of it. There's a good chance there would be a number of tour operators that would want to take advantage of the same opportunity. Regardless, I think you've referenced TCK and you're familiar with the work TCK is doing. Have you had conversation with TCK about their primary goal of increasing visitor numbers in the shoulder seasons rather than in the summer season?
We've been engaging with the major destination management organizations, including Banff Lake Louise Tourism and Tourism Canmore Kananaskis, where shoulder season is, well, until this year, shoulder season has consistently been the #1 driver. How do we increase shoulder season business? So the biking can run well into October, basically until the snow flies. And certainly the e-bikes can extend that season a little bit further, just with the nature of the e-bike providing a little bit of extra assistance there. So this program, I mean, I did reference the busiest of summer with having over 1,000 people on the trail, but certainly this is something that we see as a major growth opportunity in shoulder season. And I should mention, with destination management companies that will serve your conferences and whatnot, they typically don't come in the summer, simply because occupancy rates and room rates are simply too high. In addition, the people that they serve, primarily employees of existing companies, are on vacation in the summer, so they don't plan corporate events in the peak months. So our peak destination management business comes in the shoulder season. And those groups are specifically the groups that are looking for, or that are telling us that they need activities such as this. And, large hiking groups and that sort of thing, there's only so much you can do. And again, with the physical limitations of many of these groups, the hiking is not really an option. Based on varying mobility and so on, whereas the e-bikes, I think, address that very nicely.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm curious as well, you mentioned that the format of the tour would to have a guide in front of the cyclists.
Yes.
To monitor things. Would the speed be monitored? I mean, what would I walk often on the trails, some of the trails here, of course, and to be honest, as a pedestrian, I'm a little flummoxed at times by people on e-bikes who will travel silently and quickly and on the same trail. I wish we had a means of reducing the speeds that people are riding on the trails, and perhaps we do have the means, but would there be a protocol in your business to establish a certain maximum speed that's not going to terrorize the pedestrians?
Yeah, no, I understand completely. I'm a walker, I'm a runner, I enjoy the multi-use trails, and I do not like it when an e-bike blows past me. In fact, it gets my ego a bit, because I kind of fancy myself to be a stronger rider, and I don't like being passed. And so when somebody comes by with an e-bike roaring past me up a hill, not my favorite. But I mean, that is the heart of our business model for over 30 years, is responsible use of trails. We are very used to being very conciliatory on the trails when we are guiding a group of 5, 6, 10 people. We do not want any negative impact there. We do not want complaints from other visitors. So our guides are very conciliatory and very considerate, and are the first to step off the trail if a faster group wants to go by, for example. So short answer is, I mean, it's what we do, is share trails, because we don't want to lose our ability to operate. It's a privilege to do so. And so I would say that we would be very open to working with the town to see what exactly that might look like. Not to say that we would presume to know what other citizens might think of as reasonable or not. But definitely speed. We are not an adrenaline company, to put it another way. We do soft adventure. We do hiking, guiding. We do guiding walks. We do snowshoe tours. We do not do adrenaline tours. So this would be, and the guide would be providing interpretation as they go. So you'd need to be slow in order to do that, with frequent stops as well.
Great, thanks very much. Councillor Sanford, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Barman. Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Brayman. I have a question for you regarding your permitting on the Legacy Trail on the Banff National Park section. Do you have permit to do group travel on that section of the trail?
Yes, we are permitted to operate on major trails in Banff National Park, including the Legacy Trail and the Bow Valley Parkway.
And so you have e-bike permission to run a group tour on the Legacy Trail?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. My other question is, when you're doing interpretation for a group, you generally have to have them gather around. How would you gather an e-bike group on a trail system without blocking the other users on the trail system?
Well, again, this is something that we're very practiced in. We would not stop in major intersections or in bottleneck zones. We would find locations of interest where there is a safe spot to pull out so that we're not interrupting the use of the trail by others. Viewpoints, pullouts, that sort of thing.
So you have to basically get your group off the trail somehow?
I would say so, yes. So one example I could think of off the top of my head, if we were to do the proposed route, at Canmore Engine Bridge, there is a large open area there where the trail is quite wide, and there are lots of opportunities to pull, say, 4 or 5 bikes off to the side. That, as opposed to stopping in the middle of the engine bridge with our bikes parallel or perpendicular to the flow of traffic, where we go on and do some interpretation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. If there's no other questions then at this time, Councillor Seeley.
Thank you, Mayor Borman, and thank you for your presentation, Mr. Brayman. Can you elaborate a little bit on the Canmore experience at the end of the ride? You're going to enjoy Canmore a little bit, go for refreshments. Is there a shopping part to your guide, or have you thought that far ahead yet?
As to whether there would be a shopping part to the guide, as if to say,
enjoy downtown Canmore, go shopping a little bit, to enjoy the experience downtown.
We haven't written a script insofar as that. We part of the interpretation will include an overview of Canmore's downtown, including the number of high quality galleries, eating establishments, and so on. But it's not part of our MO to recommend specific places or to guide people towards specific shops and so on. We would say something to the effect of Canmore is a well-established downtown. It's a town first, and we would encourage them to explore on their own and to be back at a certain time so they don't miss the bus.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much for being here today, Mr. Brayman, and taking our questions. As you may know, the practice with the delegation requests such as this is for council not to make any decision at this time. The next council regular meeting agenda, which is March 2nd, this will appear on the agenda. And at that time, council essentially has 3 different possible choices. One is that we could refer your request to administration or to a committee for that matter for further research, review, and recommendations. At that time, council could simply accept your request as information only, or council at that meeting could make a decision on the request. So those are the 3 possibilities, and they will be, this item will be on the agenda for the next regular meeting of council, first week of March.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mayor Borman and councillors. I appreciate your time here and your ears for considering this application. And I think that e-bikes are the future. They are coming. They are here. They are on our trails. We are simply proposing that we be in front of that, and that we have a plan to manage so that we can all enjoy our great trail system and our great town, and benefit economically, that as many people in the town as possible can benefit.
Great, thanks very much.
Thank you.
This time I will look to the minutes of the regular meeting of council for January the 5th. Are there errors or omissions in those minutes? Seeing none, I'll move the minutes be adopted as presented. Those in favor? Opposed? Minutes are adopted. Moving on to item G1, Land Use Bylaw Amendment 2020-19, which is the Three Sisters DC District Site 5. And Ms. Wojtenko is presenting.
No, it'll be Mr. Mayor, it'll be Jessica Carpat with
Right.
Development first.
Right. Okay, Ms. Carpat, you have the mic.
Okay, good morning, Mayor Borman and members of council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm just going to share my screen. Again, hopefully I'm sharing the right screen. If you could just confirm.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so today I'm talking to you about the Gateway at Three Sisters land use application. We are located at the intersection of Three Sisters Boulevard and the Parkway. This is a location map for the larger Three Sisters Mountain Village area. So just right off the Three Sisters exit at off the Trans-Canada. You can see that the site is identified by this red line. It's mostly treed, but there has been some clearing that has been occurring and some fill that has been occurring on the site. And that's all fill that was from the Stuart Creek Phase 3 development. This application is in alignment with the municipal development plan. You can see that the commercial land use was anticipated within the municipal development plan. And you can see on the east side of the application, you can see the multi-residential land use. I just want to call your attention to the Stuart Creek Area Structure Plan, which it mimics the municipal development plan. You can see the line of where the existing land use is today, and I'm going to point that line out in a future slide. But you can see that there is a commercial area with the multi-residential area to the east. And you can also see the concept of a principal road identified within the commercial development. And so these are all concepts that have been retained for the Gateway at Three Sisters land use application and for future subdivision. So just in context, the Three Sisters, the Gateway Three Sisters is located kind of in the middle of Three Sisters Mountain Village. You can see by the rings on the map that they identify a 5-minute walk shed in the inner ring and a 10-minute walk shed in the outer ring. The outer ring could also represent a 5-minute bike ride. And so you can see that with the introduction of commercial uses at the Gateway of Three Sisters, we're making Stuart Creek and existing Three Sisters residents have more access to sustainable transportation choices. So walking to local commercial services would be much easier, and it introduces really a number of services that aren't already there. So just to point out, the land use line that I was talking about before that is reflected in both the municipal development plan and the area structure plan that is approved today reflects the current land use that is already on site, and that's the Three Sisters Gateway District. And really, the remainder of the site is really what we're developing or what we're really concerned about with the land use application today. So you could see that what we're doing in the proposed land use is really aligning the land use districts to the future subdivision application. You can see that within the TSGD area, we're redesignating portions to B Park, which is the PD area. And we're identifying the portions of the land use application that will be environmental reserve or environmental district. So we have the municipal park area, PD, in here, and then we have a portion of park just at the southeast portion of the application, continuing a regional trail connection that runs along the transmission line pathway in that location. And then also, additionally, we are redesignating the multi-residential portion to R3 SC1. So one of the other changes that we're requesting with this part of the land use application is we are asking for new discretionary uses to be added for flexibility to the TSGD district. And so we're asking for brewery, distillery, light industrial, and for drive-through applications. And these are all discretionary uses, which allows the administration to make sure that we're still aligned with the intent of the policy within the area structure plan and the land use district. So conceptually, I pointed out previously that the principal road, and so you could see within this conceptual master plan, we're continuing with the concept of a principal main road with buildings oriented or street oriented to that road. I'm just going to point out kind of the major pieces of the conceptual master plan. The buildings in brown represent retail or commercial services that will be offered. The grocery that we're hoping to work with is in this location here. All of the buildings are as street oriented as possible. The innovation hub that we spoke to in our application is located in this area. We hope to locate institutional research, light industrial, maybe some creative manufacturing, offices within this location. We also are hoping to include about 200 beds of employee houses above retail in buildings 10, 11, and 12. And of course, within the R3 SC1, we hope to have up to, I think it's 197 units of multifamily residential within this area. So that would be in the form of townhomes, apartments, or stacked townhomes. So I'm going to pass it over to Chris Ohlenberger to speak to the remaining slides.
Thank you. Mr. Ohlenberger.
I actually thought Jess was doing a slide, but no problem. It's the next one. You can see the timeline that we were looking for with respect to the project as an overall whole. There is a subdivision application in with the administration today that's pending, of course, council's decision on the rezoning. And site preparation, we are tentatively planning to begin this spring and continue with that site work all of this year. It's a pretty ambitious program for the timing to get the infrastructure and things like that in place. However, we've got a number of tenants that are highly interested in not only the existing population of Canmore and the Three Sisters area, but what may come with the future ASPs, a decision still pending. So they're looking towards the future as well as the present. The anticipated build out for the commercial portions of the project is 5 to 7 years. And this is a project that Three Sisters is self-performing on. They are going to be doing all of the construction, and they'll maintain ownership of the buildings and do the leasing of it. So it's a little bit of a different shift for Three Sisters. Marks kind of, I think, the beginning of some changes that we're really actively looking forward to. It's nice to see that we'll actually have the commercial components. I think all of us have been waiting for enough population and critical mass to see. Can you move to the next slide, please, Jess? As part of that, we do have an offsite improvement upgrade. This offsite improvement upgrade isn't strictly needed for traffic generated by the Gateway District, but is actually a more comprehensive view of future access to the Village ASP area and Smith Creek, and improving traffic flow and calming within the entrance to Three Sisters as an overall whole. You can see on the map the first roundabout, I believe that was in Canmore, which was at Stuart Creek Drive and Three Sisters Parkway. This one will be a little bit different. That's located at the existing four-way stop off the Trans-Canada Highway. It's actually a design called a turbo roundabout, which is a strange name, but it's actually a very common roundabout design in the Netherlands and other places in the UK. There is another one in Canada as well. It's by the entrance to the Victoria Airport. The difference between this roundabout, and could you click one more keystroke, Jess? Thank you. Is that drivers are slowed down and directed within which lanes as to which destinations they're going. So sometimes you have roundabouts that have, multiple exits or multiple lanes and things like that, and you get drivers that are confused. How do you move in or out? But this type of roundabout design, and you can see those little notches that are in the center circle there, they help to guide drivers specifically to the exit they're looking for. So for example, Jess is drawing how you would exit going to the Village in downtown Canmore if you were coming from, say, Stuart Creek Golf Course, or if you're coming from the Trans-Canada Highway, as Jess is drawing now, you basically have a lane that directs you straight into heading west on Three Sisters Parkway, or you go one lane further. If you could go back to that same leg, Jess. Yes, and that leg will go around the roundabout and into the Gateway District. We've been working actually very closely with the Town of Canmore's engineering department on it. I have to give full credit. This idea was an idea of the Town of Canmore's engineering department. They thought there would be some significant pedestrian, cyclist, and traffic calming improvements associated with this type of roundabout design. So we looked at that quite hard with them, and they brought some expertise, Mobicon, out of the Netherlands to assist with some of the things. And right now, the Town of Canmore is using Mobicon as just a third-party set of eyes, given their extensive experience in the Netherlands with putting in these kind of roundabouts, to make sure that not only are pedestrians and cyclists a priority in how this is workable, but that we can, strangely enough, get tractor trailers through here, because one of the things we need for the Gateway to be successful in servicing a grocery store is the ability to bring full-size trucks slowly and carefully into the site. So you can see that the Three Sisters Parkway on the south part of the plan would shift and become that leg there. And that leads to another entrance into the site. But the primary entrance into the site actually is the, yes, thank you, Jessica, that east leg coming in there. That leads right to the spine road. And that spine road is being designed with the engineering design guidelines of the Town of Canmore to ensure that pedestrian and cyclists are the priority feature on that access road. If you could go to the next slide, Jess. So you can see there's a number of benefits from this long anticipated development. So it's pretty excited to bring this forward. We have job opportunities of about 500 to 600 long-term, retail, restaurant, office, light industrial uses. We are also talking to educational uses. And as Jess described earlier, we're looking for some additional discretionary uses to make sure that we can help manufacturing, logistics, or brewery type of operations, which weren't considered in the original Gateway District land use. The Gateway plays a vital role in facilitating Three Sisters' commitments towards housing diversity. And also, as we just described, plays a critical role in meeting some of the sustainable transportation goals by encouraging people to walk or bike down to the shopping. We are making a new pathway connection, for example, from the existing neighborhood of Stuart Creek straight down the hill and into the shopping complex. So it becomes a nice, easy, direct route where they can walk down and do their shopping. With Jess, I'll turn that back over to you to conclude.
Thank you, everybody. That's the end of our presentation. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Great, I'm sure we do. I certainly do. And if you want to stop screen sharing, we can go back to the normal view.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your presentation. And just as an observation or a note, if any residents are watching this meeting, we're trying out a different format for presentation to council of private development projects like this. It's not a Town of Canmore project, so it seems, in a sense, it seems odd to have town administration presenting a private developer's proposal. So we've asked Quantum to be the presenters, and the council will be able to ask our questions directly to the developer. And in that context, I don't know if either Mr. Ollenberger or Ms. Miller.
Thank you, Mayor Borman. I just wanted to interject and ask if administration could make our presentation prior to council getting into questions, just to be able to answer any technical questions that were raised during QPD's presentation.
Yeah, that would be great. So go ahead.
I'll turn this over to Ms. Watenko.
Morning, everybody. Thanks for your presentations, Jess and Chris. So I will finish up with the administrative recommendation and just any clarifications as well from an administrative standpoint. Can everybody see my screen?
You bet.
Great, thank you. So further to Ms. Carpet's points about alignment with the MDP and the ASP, administration's review of the application is that it is consistent with the commercial and the mixed use land use classifications in the municipal development plan. There is also consistency with the Stuart Creek ASP. And one of the things I just want to point out, in case council had questions on this, the Stuart Creek ASP has a maximum number of units listed in it. So beyond any unit counts within the DC district itself. And so the Stuart Creek ASP has, this is like really the little bit of land developed. There's also a little bit of land in Site 4 as well on the other side of Three Sisters Boulevard. But there are about 208 units of residential left for development in the Stuart Creek ASP area. However, employee housing is not counted in that unit count. So any employee housing units that we get go beyond that unit count number. So this is why it is consistent with the Stuart Creek ASP in terms of unit count. Some of the other considerations that went into this application include emergency access to the residential lands. Because of the location of the residential lands, we actually went through quite an extensive process to make sure that fire and engineering was satisfied with the access. The residential area is surrounded by very steep lands. And so the turbo roundabout was actually part of the requirement to get that appropriate emergency access to the residential lands. Undermining is also a consideration here. Of course, we consider that with all Three Sisters applications in the undermining area. There is a new undermining regulation that this will be our first application working under that. And so undermining is a consideration that will come forward with subdivision. There was a commercial market needs assessment provided with this application as well. That market needs assessment was provided to our manager of economic development. It's also the same market needs assessment that was provided for the 2 Three Sisters area structure plans that are coming forward to council next week. I did get comments from the manager of economic development, and they, finding that the report was satisfactory for these purposes, and that it could be used to support the land use application. We also had an SSR submitted for the application, and as noted in the staff report, the SSR was very positive, and a lot of that is because there is so much employee housing and commercial within the application. And just to, Chris and Jessica also spoke about future application processes, but just to highlight that, yes, we are going to need to go through subdivision applications. We have one in front of us right now, and the land use districts will need to align with that subdivision application. So as we work through the subdivision, there may be changes that come forward out of that application from the way that it has been submitted, and we'll need to deal with that through the process. So our staff recommendation is at this time that council give first reading to Bylaw 2020-19 and schedule a public hearing for March 2nd, 2021 at 9 a.m. And that concludes my portion of the presentation. I'm also available for questions.
Thanks very much. One sort of high-level question is around the shown location for the new roundabout. My recollection from previous discussions we've had at council around potential location for a second fire hall. Seems to me the second fire hall was proposed to be right about there, where the new offshoot from the roundabout would be. What are we thinking in terms of a second fire hall location in that area? Ms. Miller?
Sure. I would ask that that question be answered by Mr. Asarte.
Good morning,
Mr. Asarte?
The fire hall location proposed on that, I guess, southwest corner of the intersection is impacted by the south leg of the roundabout. And so as a condition of approvals, we are working with the applicant to find an alternative site for that in the vicinity that still meets all the requirements of the fire hall, including direct access to this intersection and onto the highway, because that was a strategic location for that reason. So we're working with the applicant. The applicant's indicated there are a number of potential sites, and that'll be part of the process to firm that up and get commitment on that site.
And as engineering, you're confident that that will be a successful discussion?
Based on our understanding of the available lands proposed and undermining in the area, I'm optimistic we'll find an equivalent or potentially better site. It's quite a constrained site. It's very, very close to the intersection itself. That was one of the constraints there. It is undermined, the existing site. So we're optimistic we'll find an alternative that's at least equivalent, if not better access.
Okay, thanks very much for that. I have a couple of questions that may be best answered by planning. One is just in regards to the Stuart Creek ASP, and it's been noted that this rezoning application is consistent with the ASP, and I appreciate that. The one part of that I'm not understanding or not certain about is the light manufacturing, which is proposed to be added to the bylaw, which I appreciate. I've always thought there is a need for additional light manufacturing opportunities in Canmore, but the ASP doesn't specifically reference light manufacturing. Is that an issue? Is that something that would have to be amended in the ASP, or is that not material?
Yeah, thanks for your question. So there's kind of different levels of plans, and in an area structure plan, things like the actual use of light manufacturing isn't a high level policy direction. So for example, providing commercial services, retail, industrial, that is more high level policy at an area structure plan. The light manufacturing is a use in our land use bylaw, and that's where it should live. If you start adding that into our higher level policy documents, you end up all the time having to find an ASP with a land use bylaw. So no, I do not recommend that the ASP needs to be amended to add light manufacturing as a commercial use. And I'd like to point out that light manufacturing, the definition of it, is really about secondary manufacturing of products that have no outdoor storage and no disturbances. And we actually list light manufacturing uses in quite a few of our commercial districts, like along Bow Valley Trail, the kind of transitional industrial district, and the Southern Business District. So they are all over, in more areas of town. And we're actually finding that with light manufacturing, it requires a certain sort of building style. And we have quite a few, even recently, applicants that approach us about using this type of area for a variety of businesses because they don't fit into a standard commercial district. So we have quite a bit of demand for this style of building that light manufacturing might go into. And it also, light manufacturing, for example, it isn't just manufacturing of widgets, it's also where we get our arts and crafts and our local products are made, like soaps. So it is something that we do encourage in those types of commercial districts.
Okay, thanks for that. Just curious, and I guess again for planning, in your discussions leading up to this report, have there been any kind of discussions with the developer around any sort of density bonusing kind of opportunities for more sustainable building standards? I know it's not typically a land use bylaw thing. I'm just curious if there's been any discussion and what our expectations might be around more sustainable development in this Gateway District.
We haven't had any conversations about that with the applicant. There are density limits in the area structure plan. The area structure plan doesn't provide for density bonusing. So that would, in my opinion, require amendment to the area structure plan to talk about getting different densities in there. Depending on the density, area structure plans are kind of high level policy, but it's a very firm unit number in there. And there is provision for not counting those units when they are employee housing or PAH. So we do have opportunities to talk about those forms of housing going above the unit count.
Great, and that's important, of course. I was curious more about the design of the buildings rather than their use.
Sorry, thank you. In the sustainability screening report, the applicant did note that they intend to achieve both LEED certified buildings and the other one, Ms. Carpet might have to answer this question, but they did indicate in their application of having certified green buildings. Mrs. Carpet, can you confirm that?
We're looking to pursue, thank you for the opportunity, Tracy. So we're looking to pursue LEED shadow and built green within the multi-residential districts. Ordinarily, on a consistent basis, most builders are achieving about a built green gold level. be dependent on what that multi-residential builder decides to pursue. But it is a requirement in the land use bylaw as well to build more sustainably.
Great, thanks for that answer. I'm looking to the rest of council to see if there's any questions. I have one other question for the applicant. You've referenced the build out expected to be 5 to 7 years. Is there sort of a priority in that build out pattern? I mean, would you start at the western end and work eastward, or would you be planning to do this project and then this project over here, and maybe the housing concurrently with some of the commercial? Do we have an idea of how that might roll out? Mr. Ollenberger.
Yeah, I'm seeing Jess was on the screen looking at me going, we could both equally answer this question, but the intent is that the phasing is cohesive. So the first phase would be north of that spine road. And then Jess, if it's helpful, you could put the map back on the screen if you like. The priority to that is to build the spine road infrastructure, the servicing and all those good things like that. The focus for the first phase is on the larger building that you can see in the map, or will see in the map shortly, which is the grocery store. That's one of the first tenants that has expressed a lot of interest. It's premature to talk about the tenancy at this point, but that is a priority, is that grocery store. Building 3 there, if you could highlight that out. Thank you, Jessica, is a car wash and gas station tenancies that we have a couple of people highly interested in that in. And then buildings, if you could point to the top one, I can't read the number, Jess, I think it's 5. Not 1, 5. Thank you. That one, that building, and 8 is the first priorities, followed closely by 13. So we're basically kind of moving, the first phase will be all north of that spine road. We're anticipating that the multifamily parcel at the end of the spine road might be concurrent or shortly behind that. We have a number of interested parties, including some local parties in that parcel. And then the later phases would be the stuff that's south of the spine road. We would probably again start at the western end and head east. So 2A, 6, 7, 9, 10, 11, 12. The timing of building 1, which is intended to be a kind of a gateway focal point restaurant, is to be determined. We're looking for the right tenant for that. So it could easily be in either phase 1 or 2. So that one is dependent on leasing interest.
And I suppose the phasing is also contingent on arranging a tenant, obviously. So it's not necessarily possible to say more precisely than that. But ultimately, you would anticipate having the entire Gateway District built out in 7 years if everything continues as it is these days?
Yeah, so we've made a few assumptions with that on the timing. We've obviously seen enough interest to proceed with the project, and we're lining up people, which is exciting. I think we've got phase 1 well underway and ready to go. So that's very exciting. The multifamily parcel that Jeff spoke about is got a lot of interest in, so that's ready to go and exciting. And then we'll be able to fill that. The nice thing about the tenancies that we're seeing to date is they're both new players in Canmore and existing local players in Canmore looking to expand and or relocate to bigger premises and expand their business operations. So it's a pretty fun opportunity to watch evolve.
Thank you for that. Are there questions from other members of council? Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Mayor Barman. Thank you, Ms. Karpat and Mr. Ollenberger, for your information and presentations. You had mentioned, Mr. Ollenberger, that Three Sisters would be building these structures. Is that correct? So you're not just subdividing the land and selling it off, you're actually doing some of the build?
That's correct. So we currently have local consultant McElhaney doing a lot of the engineering on the civil side and things like that. They're also working with us on the roundabout. And Three Sisters is keeping the commercial portions of this project. They are going to sell the residential portion. That's likely to go to a builder. So they're not going to keep that in self-perform. That will be much like we've done in the past, subdivide it, sell it to somebody else that specializes in that residential building. But the commercial portions, Three Sisters is self-performing. They've engaged some locals to do the leasing in Canmore, and they've also engaged some locals that would do the building construction. We're breaking that into two pieces. So the infrastructure would be managed by our team overall that knows very well the infrastructure, but then we've retained some local expertise to actually do the project management of the buildings themselves. And so they would build that. The possible exception to that would be the grocery store. Many grocery providers like to build their own building, even if they end up leasing it, just because of the specialty traits of plumbing and freezers and things like that. So that one building may be built by the actual grocery store operator, but then leased back.
And in the staff report, it talks about 1- and 2-story commercial buildings.
That's correct.
So when we build a 1-story building, is that the best use of land when we're squeezed for land in this valley?
Sometimes some uses aren't compatible with uses on top. I'll use the grocery store as an example. The need for large coolers on the roof and stuff like that for the freezers really doesn't lend itself well, and its footprint. It's hard to actually use that big of a square footprint, which is a shape grocers like, for loading purposes and sale purposes, to do stacked units on top. However, as Jessica could probably better articulate, we are planning on doing multi-story structures in the other phases of the commercial parts. So maybe Jessica could ask you to allude on that.
So we are looking at doing multi-story structures kind of in the eastern portion of the site. But one of the constraints with that Tracy also spoke to is the fact that Stuart Creek area structure plan has a unit cap of 900 and I believe it's 25 units. Don't quote me on that. I can't remember the number off the top of my head. And in that area structure plan, they do have, they do have special ways of counting some units, but not others, as Tracy already alluded. So, we're in this, I'm sure that if we had the choice in the future to be able to more sustainably look at maybe some of these buildings and have the opportunity to pursue that could be considered maybe in the future. But at this point, this is the plan for how we use the density that is currently allocated within the Stuart Creek area structure plan.
But if you could find a partner to put a second story on a 1-story building and designated employee housing, that doesn't count as your unit count. Is that correct?
Well, Tracy may have misspoke a little bit with regards to employee housing. Employee housing is counted, one unit is counted based on either, up to 6 beds. So depending on how many beds we put in a unit, that is counted. So there, and that's consistent with, other parts of, the current area structure plans. What's not counted is entry level housing is not counted in the Stuart Creek area structure plan, and PAH. And so there's definitely debate about how to count units and what should be counted and what's not. And that's always been something that, has been a difficulty within Three Sisters, a mountain village.
Maybe if I could add to that, Councillor Sanford, I'd say it's not precluded. We're not seeing it in the buildings that are envisioned in the first phase, but it is something we're actively discussing in the second phase, particularly on buildings 9, 10, and 11, although others might be looked at in the future as well. So it will depend on tenancies, market demand, and what's feasible at the time. So while we're not talking about it immediately, because the grocery store is difficult and a few other things like that, it is not precluded with the ability to work with planning like Tracy and Jessica just talked about, to see what we can do to improve that down the road in phase 2. But Tracy did accurately show the number of units, normal units that are available still. All of those are allocated to the multifamily site in the East End.
Could you not put commercial on the second story though?
You can put commercial on the second story. That is in a tenancy and demand oriented use. If we can find enough use for it, yes. You know, would you put retail above retail in this location? That might be difficult. That can be a challenge to lease appropriately. Even in Calgary, and I'm just using it as an example, or Portland, where you do see retail units on top of other retail units in select locations, you need to have some very strong market demand to actually accommodate that. So again, if it's possible, and if we have somebody saying we'd really like to do it and we really want to be here, happy to accommodate it. But whether we can actually build it in advance and hope they come is a different question. So that can be a bit of a challenge at times. Whether there's enough office demand, it could be a challenge as well, right? But isn't precluded. We're probably more focused on multi-story buildings for those type of office / educational or innovation uses in buildings, in the pink buildings where Jess outlined that innovation hub like 13, 14, 15, and 16.
Okay, thank you very much.
There are other questions from members of council? Councillor Comfort? I see you.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor Barman. Thank you for your presentation, everybody. I have a couple of questions. There was some mention of a school site. Can you speak to that, or am I confused here?
So the school site that's being proposed is within the Smith Creek area structure plan.
Right, okay.
We'll be speaking.
Never mind then. We'll get there.
We did speak about an educational affiliated facility within this site, but that is to come at a later stage in terms of the details. But yeah, not a school as in school fields, baseball diamonds, those kinds of things.
And not one of our local school boards or regional school boards. Okay. No. And the other question I had is, what would you describe as, you mentioned entry-level housing. What is that? And you distinguished it from PAH. So what is that?
So within the Stuart Creek area structure plan, there was a requirement to produce market housing of a certain size that kind of met requirements for, I guess, entry level affordability. And at the time that was defined to be under 1,000 square feet and to be of modest offering. And so it is something that council and Three Sisters recognizes that as part of the market mix, but may not address the affordability aspect in the way that council would like to see more strategically happen within their strategic priorities and within, you know, the Bow Valley Regional Housing Assessment, which is why the employee housing is being proposed.
Councillor Comfort, if I just jump in on that, you may recall from the 2004 era, entry level was something that council of the day and planners of the day thought might address our affordability issues. But it's very basic, as Ms. Carpat noted. Entry level is simply defined as less than 1,000 square feet. But the market was showing that 1,000 square foot or less than 1,000 square foot unit was still selling for 800,000 plus. So it didn't, that effort to provide affordable housing by limiting the size, it didn't work. And so that's what entry level housing is broadly defined as, just less than 1,000 square feet.
Okay, great. And thank you for your frankness, Ms. Carpat. That was clear. You made it very clear. And I thought I had one more question. I just can't read my writing. I'll have to pardon me. Yeah, I think that's I think that's it for now. Thank you.
Are there any other questions from members of council? Ms. Boytenko, if you could just once again indicate the next steps if this land use bylaw amendment is successful. I understand that the next step would be a subdivision application, and speak to that.
Yeah, the land use and the subdivision are running concurrently. I actually encourage a subdivision application to come in almost before the land use, because you can better evaluate the land use district boundaries with the lot boundaries. So they will be running concurrently. We do have a subdivision application. We're going to be starting to review that soon, give comments back to the applicant. That subdivision would be provided to the primary subdivision authority for decision, which is the 5 members of council. So we will be undergoing that very soon. And I just wanted to follow up on one of the points made by Mr. Asarte. When he was referring to other processes with the roundabout, that would be subdivisions. So when we're looking at the firehouse site, that wouldn't be continued in this land use bylaw amendment discussion. It will be part of the subdivision application discussion.
Thanks for that further information. I don't see any other questions. Just before I put a motion on the table, just want to confirm. So essentially, the details of this gateway application are previously been approved in higher context through the ASP from 2004. Is that accurate statement? Ms. Boytenko.
Oh, sorry, can you repeat the end of that? It went a little bit fuzzy for me.
Just confirming that the primary direction, the primary vision for the Gateway District was approved within the Stuart Creek ASP in 2004.
Yes, that's correct. Well, actually the first vision from it came from DC 198 within Site 4 and Site 5. Initially, where Site 4 and Site 5 were kind of proposed a bit of a business park and as residential. With the adoption of the Stuart Creek ASP in 2004, that's when a kind of a newer and updated vision for a commercial mixed use area came into play. But yes, this is in alignment with the Stuart Creek adopted area structure plan.
Great, thanks very much. Seeing no further questions, thank you, Mr. Ollenberger and Ms. Carpat for joining today and answering our questions. This time I will move the council give first reading to Land Use Bylaw Amendment 2020-19, Three Sisters DC District Site 5, and schedule a public hearing for March the 2nd, 2021. I'll speak in support of this motion. I've long felt that there was a real need in our community for, particularly for increased light manufacturing sort of space, and many of the other uses that are being proposed in this zoning and the application is large scale grocery, commercial. I believe that that's something that's been desired by the residents in the Stuart Creek area for some time. Clearly, you can't initiate a commercial operation of that scale without a critical mass of customers in the easy vicinity. So I'm certainly supportive of approving first reading and listening, hearing from the public on this this amendment at the public hearing on March the 2nd. Further discussion, Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Mayor Barman. So I too will be happy to support first reading and hear from the public. This has been a development that's been envisioned, as you have pointed out, within the Stuart Creek ASP since 2004. And I do agree with you that I believe that the residents of the Three Sisters neighborhoods have been waiting for this time when the promised commercial would come in. And so here we are, and a grocery store to boot is a great draw. I really think that this development has the potential to address some issues or some needs in our community, including some refreshed retail, outside of the core, as well as I said before, a grocery store and some multifamily housing. So I look forward to seeing what we hear at the public hearing, and I'd be happy to support first reading.
For the discussion on the motion, Councillor Sealy.
Thank you, Mayor Borman. I too will support first reading. I like the commercial opportunities and that product coming to market, and the employee housing portion of this as well. I think they're important community opportunities. So I will support first reading and look forward to the public hearing.
There's no further discussion. Councillor Mara.
Thank you. I too will support first reading. I'm looking forward to seeing what the community has to say. And I know we have been discussing about light manufacturing, and some of our businesses have moved east because there wasn't the availability for that. So I look forward to seeing what comes about from the community. So I will support.
Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Mayor Barman. I too will support first reading of this motion, and I think we're looking at some interesting concepts here. Also, the fact that Three Sisters is already in discussion with some tenants that are interested in these products. I think it's a good time to bring it onto the market if we pass this, and I will support it.
Councillor Comfort.
I'm right in there. I'll support it as well. I'm curious to see what the community will say. I just hope that the square foot rates, when they come in, will support small town light manufacturing. In the past, we've lost a couple of businesses. They've moved away because the one that comes to my mind is Ambler Manufacturing, which was the hats and so forth. I think they went to Nelson. So it'd be good to have some of those homegrown businesses be able to afford, have affordable light industrial manufacturing floor space. So I hope that that's the case. So I will support it and wait for the hearing.
Councillor Hillstead.
Thank you, Mayor Borman. I too will support first reading. Looking forward to the public hearing, just to get the community's feedback on this. I think it's also, as many have already stated, that it's good that we're getting some more commercial up there, which is long overdue, and that just look forward to the public hearing and seeing what our community has to say.
No further discussion. I'll call the question on the motion. Those in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried unanimously. And I'll move on to item G2, Business Registry Bylaw Amendment 2021-01. Ms. Miklat.
Good morning, Council. Let me just share my screen. And you should be able to see the presentation right now.
I do.
Excellent. I am here today to ask Council to give first reading to the Business Registry Bylaw Amendments 2021-01 and schedule a public hearing for March 2nd, 2021. And just as a historic reminder, the Business Registry Bylaw is permitted under the Municipal Government Act, Part 2, Division 1, Section 8, and amendments are two amendments to the bylaw were last done in 2015. And that's when the last updates were put forward. So much of the work related to the bylaw, and I should probably forward my presentation, are to update some of the language, give clarity to some of the definitions that were not in there or have since been updated in the land use bylaw to make sure that we have continuation of that language or alignment within our different guiding documents. It's included busking and the appropriate enforcement language there, and a policy will be brought forward to Council around that in the March meeting. It has removed the transfer of license option And because the work related to that is similar to the creation of a brand new license. And so it's not as simple as people might think it is, and for workload. It's also reduced some red tape that were elements that were included and required a lot of our business applicants to provide proof of a number of documents that are actually mandated by other levels of government. They are far better able to enforce that. So one of the things that we have changed is section 5.12 as one of the bigger changes in the bylaw, and essentially requires the business owner to make sure that they have all the required documents, such as their AGLC license, public health inspection, AMVIC if appropriate to them, in place before they open their doors. We no longer would require them to provide that proof to us, as AGLC or AMVIC, for example, have quite stringent enforcement and ticketing options. And in a process change on their part, they now require the Town of Canmore business license before they will even issue a license to the business owner. It just slows down the process on our end, having to go back and forth, issuing a temporary license so that they can get that information and then issuing a new license. And as we are processing over 2,000 licenses a year, finding ways to streamline and reduce hindrances is a more effective use of our time. We have included some language that should we have some concerns or unsure if they're legal to operate, we can still ask for that information from them, should that be the case. Additionally, we're in the 21st century, and so allowing our temporary out-of-town businesses to show a digital copy of their business license versus having a hard copy on them is a better use and probably more environmentally friendly way, rather than them having to print a copy, us mail a copy, and then having to have it on site with them and keep it whole. It's easier for them to just be able to show it on their phone. There's a minor change to Schedule A of the business registry bylaw. The inclusion, of course, of a busking license, which aligns with our micro business, so businesses that earn under 30,000 a year. It is a little bit less than what Banff is charging, but we felt a good starting point for us to consider. And a change to the temporary out-of-town business licenses. The change from 4 months to 3 months, and the inclusion of a 6 months business license. The council remembers from reading the bylaw, at halfway during the year and in the last quarter of the year, we give a discount. So if you have an annual license, if you apply for it in July, you get that license at $300. What has happened is that if they then come in, let's say August, because we didn't have the 6 months option, businesses would apply for a annual license, and that triggers for us annually that we send out renewal notices and then follow up if they don't renew that license. And often they just chose that option because it was cheaper for them, but it does have an administrative consequence both for finance and business registry to do follow up and then find out that they actually didn't need an annual license. It was just the cheaper option. So for that reason, we have included that now in the process. And that was it for my presentation. I will note that we reviewed the changes with the CBA, and that's BODA, the Chamber of Commerce, BIA, CHLA, and TCK, the Tourism Association, in order to see if there were any challenges that there were members were opposing, and the boards reviewed and provided feedback and comments. Nothing triggered for them as major, but because we made changes to Schedule A, the bylaw requires a public hearing, and for that reason, we have put that as May 2nd at this point in time.
Great. Thank you very much for the presentation. Pretty straightforward. Couple of questions around the busking, as that's a new something new for us. So you have indicated the busking policy will be coming forward soon. Do you know when that might be?
That will be at the March 2nd meeting.
March 2nd, right?
So.
And that'll put the parameters around which people can busk.
Absolutely. So in discussions with the BIA and other partners, we have looked at what other communities have done, what would work better in Canmore, and provided a framework and some guidelines and designated locations, and have included in there the option for locations to be added upon request of business owners. But that's, we'll get into some of that detail in the March 2nd meeting.
Great. Well, I don't want to spoil the suspense, so I won't ask any questions. Just to be clear, I suppose, the busker license, which we are being asked to approve this time, the $32.50 would be for the year or balance of the year from application.
Would be for the season as
Right.
outlined in the busking policy, indeed.
Right.
And yeah, if approved by council for a second and third reading to the bylaw.
Great. So would there be a process in the busking policy that outlines the application process, or is that only with you? Okay. Then I won't ask any more on that. Are there other questions from council regarding the bylaw amendment, the business registry bylaw amendment that's on the table right now? Councillor Comfort?
I'm just a little nervous that something might slip through the cracks. I get that the business owners are pleased not to provide more paperwork, and I agree, it can be a huge hassle to collect everything and so forth. And also that the agencies have the power to enforce better than the town of Canmore, but I just worry that, like for, public health, for example, and sanitation, and are we talking about market vendors here, street vendors that prepare whatever, that they're properly done? Because I know when we did the pierogi booth at the folk festival, the health inspector came around 4 times a day and checked the temperature in the freezers and checked the temperature of the, food in the warmers, and it was pretty stringent. So I'm just a little concerned that maybe this is too lax, but
so there
I
is
don't
a
know
bit
whether
of
that came up.
Yeah, fair question. And there is a bit of a different approach when it comes down to market vendors, because they have to work with our market manager under the Alberta Farmers Market, and they have their process for inspection. So they have to have approval from the health inspector if it's related to those products beforehand. Yeah, so it's a bit different for market vendors than it would be for a commercial tenant. And again, if you open a restaurant, that is mandated by various levels of government in order to have that in place. What we're just saying is it's up to them to have that. They have to post that publicly in their restaurant. And we are in regular communication with AHS on these types of applications.
Okay, thank you.
Just Councilor Mayor, before you ask your question, can you confirm that the Mountain Market, for instance, that would operate under a community special event permit? Is that right?
So the Canmore Mountain Market is, we retain somebody to manage that on our behalf. We set the agreement with Alberta Farmers Markets annually, and they would operate indeed under an event permitting process.
Thank you. Councillor Mara.
Thank you, Mayor Barman. I just wanted, just out of curiosity, in section 5.2.1, could you just maybe describe what a pre-approved route would look like, or what business that would apply to?
So we have in previous years received various applications that don't require, for example, a road use agreement or a development permit, but in our opinion, would require additional elements to satisfy the town. Previously, for example, before COVID, we had an application for a beer bike, and the beer bike we wanted to be able to say that's your designated route, and because they don't require a road use agreement, or the fact that as a town, in discussions with the RCMP and Bylaw, that we would want them to have insurance and proof of insurance as an element. Now, given the road projects, we weren't comfortable in moving forward with that application, but we do want to make sure that we have a framework in place that should applications like this come forward, we can put that in place. So thinking of the presentation that council just had, that there's a designated route that is attached to said application before it gets approved. And currently that would not be a requirement anywhere else under any other bylaw.
Thank you. And I have one other question, if I may, Mayor Berman.
Go ahead.
When a vendor comes, I've had in this summer specifically, where a vendor has knocked on the door and has a product in the back of their truck. Now they would require a license or a permit.
Correct.
And I would be in my purview or right to ask them if they have a permit to operate in the town. Is
Absolutely.
that correct?
Yes.
Okay, that's all I needed to know. Thank you.
There are
We
other
highly
questions?
encourage that behavior.
Councillor Hillstead.
I have two quick questions. One's actually just to kind of jump on what Councillor Mayer was just stating. So if we ask for the license, if they, don't have a digital copy of it or whatever, like who do we contact at the town to basically verify that someone has a license if people aren't being compliant or won't show things and say, oh yeah, I have it, but I just don't have it with me? Like, is there
Well, the bylaw requires them to be able to show it. If they don't, then, there are enforcement elements in the bylaw. So initially, I would say call Business Registry. We can confirm. If they become belligerent or you're unsure, then bylaw is always your option here, and Craig can probably speak to that. Generally, when people hire a contractor as well, we just ask them to verify that who you're hiring. If it's somebody from out of town, they actually do have a business license to operate here.
Okay. The other question is just clarity on section 5.13.1. So when a business has been transferred from one person to another, the applicant must provide evidence of a transfer or assignment of the interests of the existing licensee or of the location of the business. So is this just because since now you can't transfer the business license, it's just to show that it has been transferred when they're applying for a new business license?
Yeah, so for example, if a company is operated by parents, but the children take over that operation and they are now the legal owners, just the proof of that transfer. If they have moved location, the proof of their new lease or the purchase of those things as part. That was always the case. We have just spelt it out to be very clear that it's your responsibility to provide us with that information as the business owner. Previous years that might not have happened, and then we keep sending the old business owners the renewal notices, and they then get the increased enforcement chasing people, and then you find out oh, but there's a new owner, and but it's the same name. And appreciate that, but that does need to be updated in the system.
Okay. Thank you.
No further questions from members of council. Seeing none, thanks very much, Ms. McLeod, for your presentation.
Thank you.
And at this time, I will move the council give first reading to Business Registry Bylaw Amendment 2021-01 and schedule a public hearing for March 2nd, 2021. Speaking to that motion, Councillor Hillstead.
I sent Mrs. Hyde with there's a few typos within the business registry amendment or bylaw amendment. So I'm not sure if she needs to show those on screen or whatnot, but there's just a couple, there's 3 or 4 like small typo, so I'm not sure if it's one of those things that we have to actually have a motion to amend, or if it's just a clerical quick fix.
Well, sorry, Councillor Hillstead, I didn't understand your intent to do that as an amending motion, but they are non-material. They're
Yeah,
the
so that's why I
addition
was
of-
I just
got
wanted
a
to make
couple
sure that
spelling
we
corrections.
didn't need to do an actual amendment or anything.
No,
It's just it can just be done. Okay.
Yeah.
That's all.
Thank you very much for that.
Yeah. But with that, everything I'm seeing in here, all the updates and stuff, I'm quite happy with. So at this time, I will support the motion.
It's good to know that Councillor Hillstead always does a deep dive on spelling for various bylaws. So thank you, Councillor Hillstead. Were there other questions or discussion, I should say? Seeing none, Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Mayor Barman. I'd be happy to support first reading of the business registry bylaw. The amendment. I think it's great that administration is able to keep on top of reviewing our bylaws and policies every 4 to 5 years, as we have asked them to do, and include any changes that will make life a bit easier on the public or to provide a little bit less work for administration. So happy to provide first reading and look forward to the public hearing.
Further discussion on the motion. I will call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. This time I'll call a short break. The agenda would show a 15-minute break, so we'll come back at 11:20. That's 13 minutes. That should be adequate. So we'll reconvene at 11:20. Here we are. Almost. Okay, I think we're all reassembled. Ms. DeSoto, did you have something to add? No.
No, just wanted to let you know administration is here as well.
Okay. There you go. What a bunch of troopers. Okay, we're gonna then reconvene the meeting and move on to item G3, which will address borrowing bylaws 2021-03 and 2021-04. Ms. Richardson.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. I'm just going to share my presentation here, if you'll bear with me one moment. Okay, hopefully that should be showing for everyone.
That's perfect. Thank you.
Perfect. So I'm here regarding, as you said, the two borrowing bylaws for our 2021 capital projects. As such, our recommendation is that Council give first reading to borrowing bylaw 2021-03 South Bow River Loop Feeder Main Construction Phase 2, and that Council give first reading to borrowing bylaw 2021-04 Water Main Connection Upgrade for Old Canmore Road. These, and just as a reminder, these were two projects that came forward for early approval at the January 5th meeting. The first borrowing bylaw 03 is, as I mentioned, for the South Bow River Loop feeder main, and this is the second phase of the construction. So as a reminder, this is to complete the second phase of a new feeder main connecting the Three Sisters area that's adjacent to the wastewater treatment plant to the south end of Bow Valley Trail. And this particular phase is the tie-in along the Bow Valley Trail to the wastewater treatment plant to complete that South Bow Loop. The total budget for the project is $3.3 million, and the intended funding is $3 million in borrowing, which is what we're here about, and then the remaining $300,000 from the Water Utility Reserve. The next one, 04, is the water main connection upgrade at Old Canmore Road. And again, this project is to complete a connection of the water main, and this was part of the initial water upgrades that were identified as part of TIP 20. This project is for a total of $500,000, $130,000 of which is to come through the debenture for the borrowing bylaw, and the remaining $370,000 comes from the Water Utility Reserve. You may notice that for neither of these projects, there was any identified offsite levy money used. And that's because nothing has been collected to date for these projects. And to the extent that they are eligible, then that money will be collected in the future going forward, but it doesn't form any part of the funding at this time. So the financial impacts of these two projects are as outlined here. We're proposing that the borrowing for each of these projects be for a term of 15 years. The current indicative interest rate, I'm having trouble with words today, from the Government of Alberta is 1.726%. Fluctuates slightly, but as council is aware, borrowing rates are quite low right now. The borrowing bylaw does require that we specify a maximum rate, so we've set the maximum rate at 7%. And so here we can compare the impacts of the two projects, both at the current rate. The rate will fluctuate between now and the time we actually take the borrowing, but what we're roughly expecting to actually pay versus the maximum rate that is specified as allowed in the borrowing bylaw. So for the South Bow River Loop, at the current indicative interest rate of 1.726%, total interest for the borrowing would be, say, $418,000, and the semi-annual payments would be at $114,000. If we were to go to the maximum rate, again, highly unlikely, but specified in the bylaw, then total interest would be $1.9 million with the payments at $163,000. For the water main connection upgrade, the total interest at the current rate is about $18,000, as you can see there, and the semi-annual payments would be about $5,000. Again, at the maximum rate, total interest would rise to $82,000, and the semi-annual payments would rise to $7,000. As a reminder, this is how our planned borrowing, including these projects, tracks against both our internal and the MGA specified debt limit. So for 2021 here, this third column, you can see that we are well below our internal limit. This is the proposed timeline for these borrowing bylaws. So first reading today. Again, the reason these were brought forward for early approval is that there is some urgency relating to water levels, which is why these are brought forward early. So we'll be advertising this week and next. The 15-day petition period would expire on February 26th, and then I'll be back for second and third reading on March 2nd. So in conclusion, again, our recommendation is that council give first reading to these two borrowing bylaws today, and I'm happy to take any questions at this time.
Thank you for this presentation, Ms. Richardson. Certainly, we've had previous discussions around both these projects. So council is up to speed with the need to approve the borrowing bylaws. Councillor Sanford, do you have questions?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Barman. Thank you for your presentation, Ms. Richardson. Looking back at that debt limit at the bar graph, is this particular debt factored into the 2022 debt?
Correct. So we would be looking to take it in 2021 at the time it's required, and then it forms part of, I can pull the table back up if that would be helpful, but you can see
Sure.
the two colors. One is for new and one is for existing, and then it rolls into the existing debt for the remaining years in the table.
So that forms part of that.
Correct.
Are you bringing it up?
Oh, sure. Yeah, if that would be helpful. You'd think I'd be faster at this by now, but alas. This guy. Oh, I forget the shortcut.
That's okay. We can see that.
Yeah. Sorry, I'll just make it a little bit bigger. So you can see that red is always the new debt, and then blue is the total existing. So it would form part of this in 2021, and then would form part of the existing debt for those future years. So it's the cumulative impact.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you for that. Are there other questions this time from members of council? Seeing none, thanks very much for your presentation today, Ms. Richardson.
Thank you.
With that, I will move that council give first reading to borrowing bylaw 2021-03, the South Bow River Loop feeder main construction phase 2. And that council give first reading to borrowing bylaw 2021-04, water main connection upgrade in the old Canmore Road. Discussion on that motion. I'll certainly support the motion. These are really, I would say, critical projects. We've certainly had a lot of presentations and information sharing with the public around these projects, what they're intended for and why they're necessary. As has been noted, the resulting new debt, if these bylaws are approved, ultimately is accommodated within our projected debt and debt servicing balances. So for those reasons, I'm happy to support this motion. Further discussion on the motion. Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Mayor Barman. I'd be happy to support both of these motions. As you pointed out, we've had quite a bit of discussion about these in the community, and they are both required projects specific to water and waste, which is one of the core services that we provide as a municipality, and is important that the public have trust that these things are being maintained and constructed based on need, not on politics. So I'm happy to support this. Thank you.
There's no further discussion on the motions. I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Moving on then to item G4, the Cannabis Bylaw Amendment 2021-02. Mr. Burt.
Good morning, Mayor Borman and members of council.
Good morning, and it's a pleasure to have you back before council, Mr. Burt.
Thank you. I'm happy to be back. I'm here this morning to present updates to the cannabis bylaw, and I'm recommending that council give first, second, and third reading to bylaw 2021-02, When council approved the cannabis bylaw on October 16th back in 2018, you also directed administration to return by October of 2020 with a report providing an update on the cannabis consumption ban, and if further options should be considered to loosen the regulations based on the information over this time period. Due to the impacts of COVID-19 and a leave of absence, this timeline was not achievable, but I'm here today. Since the bylaw has passed, it has pretty much been a non-issue for the community. The bylaw department has received 0 complaints from the public regarding public consumption of cannabis and has issued very few warnings and tickets. Since October, 7 warnings and 1 ticket for public consumption of cannabis has been issued. In speaking with the RCMP staff sergeant, he reported that since the legalization and the cannabis bylaw passing, it has been a non-issue for the RCMP as well. No other feedback has been obtained or received that has justified administration to loosen the regulations relating to the public consumption of cannabis. However, after passing of the bylaw, the president of the Canmore Hotel Lodging Association met with administration to address their concerns with the wording in the bylaw as it relates to hotels. Administration committed to meeting with the CHLA prior to the end of the review period. At the start of this year, administration met with John Brownlee, the president of the CHLA, to hear and address their concerns and to confirm this is not about consumption of cannabis in hotels. They are fully in support of not allowing or permitting consumption of tobacco or cannabis in hotels. Rather, their concern was about the specific reference to hotels and duties of managers that they felt were not required. So the bylaw that's before you today being proposed can be broken down into 2 categories. Excuse me. Resolving concerns identified by the CHLA. And I would want to note that they were provided with a copy of the bylaw and are supportive of the changes that are before you this morning. Second point is updating fine amounts to be consistent with the Tobacco Smoking Reduction Act. I would point out that the bylaw has undergone a legal review. And I'm going to share my screen and we will walk through the brief red line copy. You should see bylaw 2018-24 in front of you. So this is the red line version of the current bylaw. So the definition of manager, we have struck out the words hotel and replaced
Sorry, is it
them.
possible to make that a little bigger, Mr. Burt?
I can, how's that? Is that?
A little bit bigger might be helpful. Thank you.
That's helpful for me as well, so thank you. So changes contained within the bylaw are to strike out the word hotel and replace that with the word place. And we'll get to that in a moment. Second change is to strike out section 3.2, which states no person shall smoke or vape cannabis in a hotel. Upon further review, we are confident that no person shall smoke or vape cannabis in a public place covers off smoking in a hotel, as public place means any place to which the public has access as of right or by invitation expressed or implied. Therefore, section 3.2 is redundant and is no longer required. Section 3.3 has been changed. It used to read, a manager must not permit a person to smoke or vape cannabis in a hotel. We have changed the wording to read, a manager of a hotel must not designate a guest room of a hotel as a smoking room. So that aligns with the Tobacco Smoking Reduction Act, where managers can designate smoking rooms in hotels if they choose to do so. With this amendment, this will prohibit them from doing it while still meeting the needs of the CHLA. And the final components, as I scroll through, are into Schedule A. So we have increased the fine amount for smoking or vaping cannabis in a public place to $300 to be consistent with the Act. As previously noted, we've struck out the smoke or vape cannabis in a hotel as it's redundant, changed the wording in the description of manager of hotel designate guest room for smoking, and increased the fine amount to be consistent with the Act. I would point out that we have had no issues of managers allowing people to smoke or vape cannabis or designating rooms for smoking since this bylaw has come into effect. I'll stop sharing my screen. That brings me to the end of my presentation.
Okay, thanks very much for that. It's pretty straightforward, and appreciate you bringing this back as requested, and understand the delay. One question in the bylaw itself. When I was looking at the smoking control bylaw, the same definition applies, or we see the same definition of manager as it exists. Okay, let me start over again. So in this bylaw that we're being asked to amend, the definition is specific to hotels. Manager means employer, yada, yada, responsible for a hotel. We're being asked to change that to place. I appreciate that change. In the smoking control bylaw, the definition of manager is, if I recall, still refers to person who is responsible for a hotel rather than a place. Is that something that needs to be looked at, or is that fitting for the smoking control bylaw?
No, it will need to be looked at, and it will need to be updated at a later date. So upon amending this bylaw, I did note that, and it will be coming back at a later date for a minor amendment so that the cannabis bylaw and the smoking control bylaw have consistent wording.
Great, thanks for that. Any other questions for Mr. Burt? Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Mayor Barman, and welcome back, Mr. Burt. It's great to have you home back again.
Thank you.
I just had a question with regards to stakeholder engagement. I say here that your stakeholder engagement was limited to the Canmore RCMP and the CHLA president. Was there any other stakeholder engagement performed, perhaps with people that had written in the past, or with any of the cannabis shops that we have in town, or anything like that? Or was it strictly with the police and with the CHLA?
It was strictly with the police and the CHLA. No other engagement occurred.
And that's because?
Based on the very few complaints, little to no or no feedback received, and in consultation with senior administration.
Okay, thank you.
Is there other questions this time for Mr. Burt? Seeing none, thanks for presenting today.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too. With that, I will move the council give first reading to Cannabis Bylaw Amendment 2021-02. See if there's discussion on the motion. Seeing none, I'll call the question on Councillor McCallum.
Thank you. I will support this. However, I don't feel that the stakeholder engagement was quite appropriate. And I believe that based on the time that the original motion was made for admin to come back, that the spirit of that was to engage more perhaps with the public. I understand we're also in the middle of a pandemic. So I will take that as partially the reason why we did not move forward with more fulsome engagement on this, but yes, otherwise I guess I will vote in favor of the amendment or motion. Thank you.
Any other discussion on this motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. I'll then move the council give second reading to Cannabis Bylaw Amendment 2021-02. Discussion on that motion. Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. And I'll ask that council give third reading, or I'll move the council go to third reading of the bylaw. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. And I'll then move the council give third reading to Cannabis Bylaw Amendment 2021-02. Discussion on that motion. Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. And that's going to take us to item H1. The Regional Mass Transit Memorandum of Understanding. Ms. Smithers, you're speaking to that.
Yes, although I thought, Mayor Borman, that you were going to be speaking to this item as a member of the committee as well. I'm happy to, though.
I'm happy to speak to it. As council knows, there have been a number of meetings between a group of municipalities in the region, Banff, Canmore, Cochrane, City of Calgary, and Stoney Nakoda, loosely formed coalition just to have conversations around the need and interest for having well-delivered opportunities for public mass transit between the Bow Valley and the City of Calgary. And to an extent, this loose gathering of municipalities was initiated in response to the news that was made public some time ago now about the possibility of public mass transit delivered through a rail project was being promoted by a private sector interest group, but the federal government initiated some consultation and studies in regards to that. This loosely defined group that I've mentioned, we've agreed that we should create an understanding that makes it clear why we're meeting. And the primary reason is just to talk about mass transit opportunities in general and not specific to rail or bus. All of us at the table recognize that public transit between the Bow Valley and the city is critical for a number of reasons. We've had discussions about this at council before. The MOU that's in the agenda has been edited a few times. The initial MOU that was prepared by, I think, a consultant or somebody within the City of Calgary admin, was reviewed by all of the partners in the group, and for a number of reasons, edits were suggested. This edited version of the MOU, the town has indicated that we would be comfortable with signing on to this MOU, as have all of the other partners. Well, I believe the other partners, there's some question around whether or not Stoney Nakoda would be prepared to sign this MOU. But certainly the town of Banff and Cochrane and the City of Calgary have indicated support for the MOU. That's it in a nutshell. It doesn't commit us to anything really other than continuing to be involved in conversations. If there are questions, I'm happy to try to answer or throw it to Ms. Smithers. Or Ms. Smithers, if you wanted to add some detail that I missed, jump in.
No, I think you did an excellent job. Happy to help answer questions.
Okay, thank you. Questions then in regards to the MOU? I'm going to see that as no questions. So in that case, I will put a motion on the table that council approve the town of Canmore being a signatory to the memorandum of understanding supporting investigation and implementation of regional mass transit between Calgary, the Bow Valley, and Banff National Park, and direct the mayor to sign the MOU on behalf of the town. Discussion on that motion. Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Mayor Barman. I am really pleased to see this MOU come forward in its amended state. Thank you for all the hard work that you and Ms. Smithers have done to get us here. You know, I'm really passionate about ensuring that we have sustainable transportation between the City of Calgary and the town of Canmore throughout the Rockies Bow Valley. And this is an important step towards doing that. Hitching our wagon to one particular type of transportation, understanding that in the grand scheme of things, one transportation system could actually feed to another. And I would give council an example of the GO train system in Ontario. Growing up, there were a lot of GO buses that were moving in between communities. And in the end, the ridership that was demonstrated through those GO buses is what allowed the province of Ontario to bring forward the GO train system. It's been seamless in some places and not so seamless in others, but it really shows an integrated system and it can actually something that we could see here in the Rockies and the Bow Valley as well. So I'm happy that the Alliance is open to pursuing all options, particularly with tighter budgets and during COVID time, but I believe that this is a really important part of our sustainable transportation network moving forward, and I'm really happy to support the signing of this MOU. Thank you for your work on this, Mayor Borman.
And just to be clear, as you know, Ms. Smithers has been involved. In fact, these discussions go back to the times when Mr. Fark was in the GM role. So it's been going on for some time. Further discussion on the MOU, Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Mayor Borman, and thank you, Ms. Smithers, for all your contributions to this. I too would be very happy to support this direction, and I think our community has spoken to us many times about the options of providing mass transit in the whole region. And I think as an expansion of the region, this is a really big step, and showing that mass transit is a good stepping stone to any future transportation options is really important. So I'd like to see us advance this, and thank you very much for your work on it.
Thank you. Are there further comments, discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Now we'll move on then to item H2, the appointment to the Marigold Library Board. Ms. Hyde, you're speaking to that.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Borman. This will be quick. Council has seen a similar motions to this before. The Canmore Public Library is a member of the Marigold Library System, so their bylaws require council to appoint a member from the Canmore Library Board to the Marigold Library Board. They actually need a member and a substitute, or a representative and a substitute representative. They don't have someone come forward yet for a substitute, so we'll bring that motion back to council at a future date. But in the meantime, the library has submitted a request that council appoint Ann Medikosh as the Town of Canmore Library Board rep to the Marigold Library Board.
Thank you for that quick and comprehensive overview. Are there questions for Ms. Hyde? Seeing none, thank you very much. And I will then move the council appoint Ann Medikosh as the Town of Canmore Library Board representative to the Marigold Library Board for a term ending at the 2021 annual organizational meeting. And Councillor Mara.
I just putting a little thing out there that I support this motion and recommendation, as Ms. Medikoff has been a very active member of the library board, and I'm happy for her to represent us at the table of Marigold system.
Thank you for that. Is there other discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. And that will bring us to item H3, which is Councillor Comfort's addition in regards to the 1976 coal policy rescission. Councillor Comfort, you have the mic.
I'll make it short. I won't go on and on, although I could, as you all know. I think that it's very important that this policy, the coal policy of 1976, be reinstated as it protected the regions that really needed to be protected. It was a very comprehensive consultation done with a wide swath of stakeholders over a long time, and provided the protection that was needed. It's not true that it was a that it's an outdated policy and that there are modern regulations that have now taken over the protection of those very vulnerable, fragile environmental places. So I would like to support the number of citizens who have contacted council, myself, and I think some others, by asking that we send a letter to the Premier asking for this reinstatement. That's pretty much all I have to say. I think all of you may be familiar with this issue. It's been in the press a lot lately, and certainly on social media. And that's pretty much all I have to say, I think. Do you have any questions?
Are there questions for Councillor Comfort? Seeing none. Thank you. Councillor McCallum, you have a question?
Yes, my question to Councillor Comfort was what she was hoping to come of this. What was she was looking for the mayor to provide a letter? Is that?
Yes, I have a motion to propose. So
Okay,
I
all
will
right.
go ahead and do that. I think Ms. Hyde has it maybe on a slide, or if not, I have
Yes, I have
okay.
it. Stand by.
So at this time, we can certainly be asking questions of Councillor Comfort for her sort of background questions and rationale for bringing this motion forward. And then when the motion's on the table, we can speak to the motion itself.
Just a sec.
Must be lunchtime at the lodge.
It is lunchtime at the lodge.
Councillor,
So, yeah, anybody have questions? Oh,
Councillor McCallum, did you want to rephrase your question with seeing the proposed motion on the overhead or on the shared screen?
No, the motion actually relatively answers my question. I agree with Councillor Comfort. I too have received emails. I have actually, on my own as a citizen, sent my own feedback to the Premier, but I know that many of our neighbors in the area, particularly in the watersheds to the south of us, are affected by this policy, and we have seen quite a bit in the press about their objection to it in general. So
I also sent an email to our MLA as just a citizen and on my own behalf, and I've received a reply which did not satisfy my, I have to say, did not satisfy my concerns.
Okay, are there other questions for clarification on the subject at hand? If not, then Councillor Comfort, you could put your motion on the table.
So I move that council direct the mayor to write the Premier with a copy to our MLA requesting that the Alberta government reinstate the 1976 coal development policy, which was recently rescinded without adequate public consultation.
And did you want to speak to your motion, or do you feel you have already?
Just to say that on the last part of that motion, without adequate public consultation, this was done on a Friday, the Friday before a long weekend in the middle of COVID. So there was not, it was just, and it was done unilaterally of a policy which took years to craft and took a lot of all the stakeholders to the table and created a policy that's very effective. So to just out of hand to cancel it summarily, it shows great respect, I think, or great disrespect to the people of Alberta. So that's why I would like to have this letter written.
Thank you for that. I'll speak in support of your motion. I believe that the rescission of this policy will have real and lasting effect across the entirety of the eastern slopes, which should be of concern to all Albertans, not only those in the immediate vicinity of the current coal fields. I've always felt that the coal policy that was approved by Premier Lougheed's government many years ago has had a really important long-term benefit to the province, and changes to a policy such as that really should be vetted through a comprehensive public engagement process. For that reason, I will support your motion to have the town, through the mayor, send this letter to the Premier and our MLA. Others speaking to the motion? Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Mayor Barman, and thank you, Councillor Comfort, for bringing this motion forward. I too will support the motion. I believe we should do everything we can to protect our aquatic ecosystems and keep the mine runoff from open pit mines, coal mines, running into our water system. So I think we should revisit this and send the letter to the Premier to ask him to reconsider that.
Further discussion on the motion? Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Mayor Barman. I'd be happy to support this motion of Councillor Comforts, and I thank her for bringing it forward. I do believe that we need to stand in solidarity to our neighboring municipalities that will be directly affected by this rescission of the 1976 coal development policy. They are going to be directly affected by this change. And although some municipalities are a bit flat on it, there are many that are quite passionately against this occurring without any consultation to their communities. And as was pointed out earlier, absolutely unilaterally. So again, I thank Councillor Comfort for bringing this forward, and I look forward to seeing a copy come from the mayor.
Further discussion on Councillor Comfort's motion? Councillor Comfort.
I just want to thank you all for your support, and it is a very important issue. It's everything is connected. You know, we hear about these issues locally here, and if it's true, we have to support our colleagues, even if we're not directly involved. Although we are. So there you go.
Any further discussion on the motion? Councillor Mara.
Thank you, and thank you, Councillor Comfort, for bringing it forward. And I echo much of what all of my colleagues have said. And as everyone knows, I'm a proponent of public consultations, so I will definitely support this for, like I said, that many of the reasons have already been expressed. So thank you again.
Further discussion on Councillor Comfort's motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Thank you for bringing that forward, Councillor Comfort. I know that's been on the minds of not only other members of council, but a great number of people in our community. At this time, we will be going in camera to discuss the land disposition issue. I'll look to the municipal clerk to provide me the actual section of FOIP that I should refer to in the motion.
Yes, just one moment.
I'll confirm with Ms. DeSoto that there won't be any motions coming forward after this in-camera discussion.
No, Mayor Berman, that's correct. We do not have any motions for council to consider.
Okay, so for any viewers in the public, we'll be going in camera this time, and we will only be coming out of in camera to adjourn the meeting. So there won't be any other business or motions discussed after the in camera portion of the meeting. So if Ms. Hyatt has the FOIP section that I want to refer to. Thank you very much. So I'll move that the council take the meeting in camera at just about noon to prevent disclosure of information related to the town's negotiating position in accordance with section 25(1)(c)(3) of the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. Call the question. Those in favor? Opposed?